Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, after months of negotiating, Senate Republicans block a sweeping national security and border reform package. Plus, officials with the NTSB say 4 key bolts were missing from the Boeing-made 737 MAX 9 that suffered a traumatic door plug blowout.
Plus, after a stretch of dry conditions, we are tracking some more rain chances. Those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. After months of negotiations, a bipartisan bill negotiated between the White House and senators on both sides of the aisle finally came up for its first vote in the Senate. The bill, which would strengthen the border in exchange for military support for Ukraine and Israel, did not make it very far. CBS's Skylar Henry has more from Washington.
The bipartisan bill to strengthen the border and provide aid for Ukraine and Israel died in the Senate Wednesday.
Senate Republicans have looked more and more like their House counterparts and transformed themselves into the Chaos Caucus.
Senators on both sides of the aisle spent more than 4 months negotiating the details.
We knew from the beginning it's not going to be perfect, but we also knew the status quo is untenable.
Despite Republican leadership backing the compromise, many of the rank and file were dead set against it.
I think a Republican leader should actually lead this conference and should advance the priorities of Republicans.
The final straw came when former President Donald Trump slammed the efforts.
It turns out border security is not actually a risk to our national security. It's just a talking point for the election.
Even if the bill had passed in the Senate, Republicans in the lower chamber of Congress declared it dead on arrival in the House. Republicans are not passing the bill to address the border, but they're still planning to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over his handling of the immigration issue.
The yeas are 214 and the nays are 216. The resolution is not adopted.
Even though they failed to impeach him on the first vote Tuesday night.
Mayorkas needs to be held accountable. The Biden administration needs to be held accountable, and we will pass those articles of impeachment.
Republicans fell 1 vote short Tuesday night, but they expect to try again when Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise is healthy enough to return to work. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Texas Democrat Al Green surprised Republicans when he left the hospital to show up and vote against Mayorkas's impeachment. House Democrats are gathered in Virginia this week for their annual issues conference. Congressional Democrats say improving Americans' lives is their top priority. House leadership says the election makes this year critical for the future of democracy and America. Leaders say they are focused on protecting women's reproductive rights, improving the economy, and finding ways to circumvent Republican, quote, chaos.
The other side of the aisle, as the leader said in his presentation on the floor on yesterday, all about chaos. Our side of the aisle looking for ways to build community.
House Democrats are committed to getting our national security funding priorities over the finish line.
Vice President Kamala Harris and President Biden will be addressing the conference this week. Tomorrow, Donald Trump's lawyers are set to appear at the U.S. Supreme Court for arguments concerning Trump's ballot eligibility. Sources familiar with the planning say Trump is not expected to attend. Instead, he will be at his Florida resort, Mar-a-Lago, before traveling to a Nevada caucus victory party in Las Vegas. The Supreme Court justices are determining Trump's ballot eligibility nationwide. The former president plans to argue presidential immunity in the classified documents case playing out in federal court in Florida. It is the same defense a federal appeals court ruling it rejected in a separate case against Trump, the election subversion case. But the two cases are very different. The election subversion case focuses on Trump's attempts to overturn election results, while the documents case focuses on his retention of classified material.
A spring preview continues on this Wednesday. Check out these awesome cameras from across the mountains, from I-64 in Rowan County to Buffalo Mountain to the London Corbin Airport. Plenty of blue sky and sunshine as we go into this evening. Those current temperatures also well above average. We should be in the 40s, most of us right now in the upper 50s and middle 60s in some areas, up to 63 for Harlan, 65 in Manchester, and 62 in Middlesboro. Also in London at this hour, most of us about 10 to 15 degrees warmer today than we were on Tuesday. More warm weather also on the way for your Thursday, but we are trending cooler as we go into next week. Up on first alert pinpoint Doppler, a clean sweep continues this evening, all thanks to high pressure off the eastern coast. And as high pressure sits here, we are tracking some more dry weather as we go into this evening. Those temperatures are cooler. We're back in the upper 30s as you wake up on Thursday, and one more dry day on the way tomorrow before some more soggy weather for your Friday, also at times into this weekend. All those details coming up in just a little bit. Steve?
Cameron, thank you. In California, a Marine Corps helicopter with 5 troops aboard went missing this morning, but has since been found. The aircraft was found a little after 9 a.m. local time by civil authorities near the community of Pine Valley, about 45 miles away from San Diego. The Marines were doing some training and were on the way back to the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar in San Diego when the helicopter went missing. Rescue crews say snowy conditions were making access challenging on the ground. The terrifying door plug blowout aboard an Alaska Airlines jet last month could happen again. That's according to the head of the National Transportation Safety Board, a day after the agency released its preliminary report. The Alaska Air incident prompted the FAA to temporarily ground all 737 MAX 9s in the U.S. until they passed an inspection, and sent ripple effects of aviation safety concerns all the way to Capitol Hill. CNN's Laura Aguirre has more on the federal investigation.
Of course, something like this can happen again.
Chilling words for any potential air travelers from the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board Wednesday.
There is no way that this plane should have been delivered with 4 safety-critical bolts missing.
Jennifer Homendy is referring to the Boeing-made 737 MAX 9 that suffered a traumatic door plug blowout during an Alaska Airlines flight last month. The NTSB said in their preliminary report Tuesday that 4 key bolts were missing.
By design, if the bolts are there, it prevents the door from translating upwards and disengaging from the stop fittings and flying off the plane.
The NTSB traced the missing bolts to Boeing's Washington State plant, where the plug was removed to make repairs before the jet was delivered to Alaska Airlines.
In order to remove the door plug, they had to remove the bolts, and they weren't put back in.
To find out why, they've requested process documentation from Boeing.
We're still waiting on that documentation, if it exists.
The search for answers is also reaching beyond Boeing.
We're also digging into FAA's oversight of Boeing.
Boeing's CEO has said that whatever the results of the investigation, Boeing accepts responsibility for what happened. As for safety, Homendy says passengers can fly with confidence.
I would have no problem tomorrow taking a flight on a MAX 9.
I'm Laura Aguirre reporting.
The FAA told Congress yesterday it has about 24 inspectors at Boeing's 737 plant, but the agency has not yet given its complete findings. Those will likely be included in the NTSB's final report about a year from now. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, a Texas-based lender and developer is being sued by 2 federal agencies accused of targeting Hispanic consumers and taking part in predatory lending. Tips on how you can avoid falling for predatory lending.
Plus, we are tracking some higher rain chances and cooler temperatures. Your first alert forecast after this break.